You ever notice how we're living in this time where it's super sexy, it's glamorous to point the finger outward and to talk about how everybody wronged you? You know what I mean? How they missed out on the best thing that could ever happen to them, right? How they were so hurtful, how you're an empath, right? But it's not so sexy to point the finger here and to consider, when have I been the problem? How might I orient differently to be better? Oh, okay. Yeah, it got quiet. It got quiet. And this is not one of those preachy, holier than thou podcast episodes where I'm going to talk about how I'm perfect because I am not. Okay, you cousins? This is a time where we're going to get into it. Okay? If you're new here, my name is Travis Percy. This is Percy Ponders. And it's a space for sensitive and thoughtful e-cousins to do life and love together. So I'll start like this, all right? I'm scrolling on the internet the other day, and I had an experience where maybe one of the most, I'd say, top 10 horrible humans I've ever met happens to like one of those quote posts by, you know, Case Kenny. And the post says something to the effect of, I'm going to keep being hot and unbothered. Don't mind me, they missed out on everything I could have been, that sort of thing. And it was just interesting because it's like, okay, I know this person in real life and I know how reckless they are. I know how they just move through men, right? Like water moves through a faucet when it's extra hot and the water pressure is good, okay? They just move through them like that, okay? And I know that this is not the sort of person who takes accountability, really, right? And here they are just reading a quote post that affirms what they would like to believe about themselves. And in that moment, it just reminded me, in not a self righteous way, but in a reflective way, what are all the ways, if we're not careful, that the internet trains us to cosplay as healed, to cosplay as always the victim, right? Always on the receiving end of unfortunate things. Teaches us to do that, to shirk responsibility. You know what I mean? For how we could be better, for how we could do better, for what part we could play and where things went wrong. And you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, Travis, we don't want to victim shame. Like there are definitely situations where people, found themselves in abusive relationships or abusive work environments or toxic work environments or had bully managers. Been there with a bully manager, been in unhealthy relationships, never abusive but unhealthy, right? There's definitely a place for saying, okay, they were at fault for said thing. They were horrible and heinous, right? But then I can also be like, wait a minute, hold up, wait a minute. What part did I play in entertaining that? Even if I wasn't per se complicit in mistreatment and whatnot, right? Because we're not going to blame people if they're genuinely victims. But what part did I play in even entertaining that by not leaving when I saw the signs that something was off? When I saw the signs that they did not give any iconic dams about my feelings? When I saw the signs that they were not interested in listening to me, only hearing themselves speak? When I saw the signs that they were saying in many different ways, that's just the way I am. And I was like, oh, let me change that. Ew, let me see what can come of this. You're telling me something and I'm going to see if I can change it, right? So I'm not perfect and I can take account for the ways I had been complicit in allowing for mistreatment by not leaving spaces where I knew I was not honored because I did not know better at the time. You did the best you could with what you had, what you knew at the time, and still that might not have been enough. Okay, so there's that. That's good to know. This whole internet culture can create this sense that you're healing, you're doing the work, when really deflection is a grand distraction, right? Because if I'm caught up in analyzing everyone else's patterns, I'm not considering my patterns. right? If I'm busy reading Young Pueblo and Case Kinney and Jillian Turecki talking about how if they're not ready for this, then, you know, they're not the right one. And if ba 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 ba, then ba 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 ba. And there's great stuff that comes out of some of those people, right? But if I'm spending most of my time and energy and effort deflecting rather than considering what's in my sphere of influence, you know, in my internal locus of control, and we don't want to do that. We really don't want to do that, e-cousins, because not only is that the peak of insanity, it's deluding yourself into thinking you're doing something when you aren't doing anything. Okay, come on, somebody. Come on, somebody. Yeah. Okay, so can I move on real quick? Let's move on real quick. So, with regard to this topic of maybe I'm the problem, and blame culture getting out of hand, okay, if I didn't lose some people already, I posted something the other day that caused a bit of a stir. And it said to the effect this, that we've maxed out on cutting people off and setting boundaries. Now it's time to work on repairing relationships after rupture. It's time to do the hard, messy, but necessary work of learning how to have hard conversations and lead with curiosity rather than accusation, right? And it's time to learn that relationship is messy and it means your inconvenience in service of this thing we're doing together called friendship, called family, called romance, right? That's not convenient, but we still do it because it's worth it, right? It's worth it because life is better when shared. It's worth it because the true mark of any healing you've done isn't how healed you are on your own terms. It's when the rubber meets the road and you're actually connecting with other people. You know what I'm saying? If you get it, you get it. What's your experience with this? Down in the comments, let me know, e-cousins. I would love to hear. And so it's like, wait a minute. Is this blame culture of it's always them? You know, I'm always the catch. I'm always the prize. Influencers love to inundate people with this message of it's, you know, you're just amazing. You're spectacular. You're fantastic. And it's like, okay, could that be an overcorrection to such a degree that it's teaching folks, right, to not consider where they might be able to improve? And let's draw a critical distinction here, right? Because when it comes to this topic of working on oneself, right, some would say, oh, don't do that because you're fine just the way you are, and that's shaming yourself into doing more work and assuming you're inadequate. And it's like, no, we're not saying anyone is deficient as a human, right? Our value is unquestionable. Your value has always been, without question, significant, high, and still that means there's work to do in growing our skill set, right? To evolve as a person you get to be in order to show up for the people you love, and evolving the person you get to be to show up for whatever you're trying to do on this planet, right? And so there's a difference between understanding we all have intrinsic value and considering, well, we get to build skills, right? And this brings me to something I stumbled into on my journey back to taking accountability for certain things instead of just pointing fingers at everyone is, oh, okay. So when it comes to being the sort of person who gets good at repairing relationship after rupture, right? Okay, that's a skill. It's a skill. It's a skill to learn to lean in when it is most comfortable to block, mute, excommunicate, and say, hey, I know we're on rocky terms right now, but I value this connection. I've really gotten to enjoy getting to know you and would love to understand where you're coming from regarding where we left off. It just seems that things are kind of in a weird place. Let's talk about that. If you also value this, you could say that to someone you're talking to in the earliest stages of dating or whatnot, right? Instead of just being weird, right? I've had so many talking stages that could have gone somewhere but went nowhere because as soon as we got out of the honeymoon phase and we got into the things are getting real phase, into the okay, you see things differently than I see things phase. Instead of leaning into curiosity, right? There were instances where the other person got weird, and just vanished. As soon as they had to do the inconvenient work of learning another person, they vanished. They were here for lovey-dovey. They were here for date night. They were here for all the fun to be had in the world. But as soon as the rubber hit the road, they were out. OUT. And I can't help but say that this culture of tapping out too soon, the culture of bailing on really good people, the culture of excommunicating folks who could have been great friends, lovers, family, right? This culture is born of emotional fragility, right? And it is a product of a lot of people being emotionally underdeveloped to handle the complexity of relating to other people and communicating, right? As we've said, relationships are messy, right? Healing, growth, all that. The worthwhile stuff is messy, right? And if you're looking for reading on this, there's a book called The Coddling of the American Mind by, I believe his name is Jonathan Haidt. I don't know if I pronounced that right. And I was reading some of that the other day, and it really got me thinking about this from a psychological and sociological lens. And basically the book talks about how, well, modern culture, especially folks who are more a product of the internet and whatnot, have been bubble wrap parented, right? And that sort of parenting style of teaching people to really, really honor all their feelings and all feelings are valid, right? And even this culture online of people over-identifying with labels and whatnot, it is creating a culture of people who are highly, highly averse to the discomfort of rewarding an important work, relational work, self-development work, period, right? Like the whole point of quote unquote doing the work on yourself, which is to say healing and becoming more emotionally adept with knowing your own feelings and patterns, right? The whole point of doing the work isn't just for the sake of touting that you do the work, right? That's not useful. The point of this whole shebang is that you become more the sort of person who is equipped to deal with life, right? When things go awry in your life, or your friend gets a difficult diagnosis, or you're grieving a loved one and still have to work, or your car breaks down and you have a financial setback and things are weird at work all in the same week and you have to be a good lover, that you don't buckle and fold and need to resort to intensive substance abuse and being avoidant and withdrawn and mean to people or mean to yourself and self-sabotage. You don't have to resort to all of those maladaptive tendencies to deal with life. You have expanded your capacity to deal with life, right? And so you actually have more gas in the tank than you used to. And so I'm learning that a true mark of growth and healing is that I have a greater capacity to tap in rather than tapping out when I am faced with moments of disagreement, right? Conflict in relationship, when there is an opportunity to just figure it out because life is lifing. I'm more equipped to do that work as I grow, expand, develop my capacity as a human, period, full stop. What's your experience with this, by the way, Cousins? I'd love to know more of what your experience with this is. And also on the subject of expanding our capacity, right? It's not lost on me that, have you noticed we live in this time where it's become very normalized to just use substances, all sorts of substances to deal with life. And I'm not here to judge your relationship with weed or alcohol or anything, right? Let's just get it out of the air. Just get it out of the way, right? There's a place and a space to get your prescriptions. If you have depression, anxiety, you name it, right? Drugs help people with true chemical imbalance in their brain show up and function optimally. I'm not speaking about that, right? That's between you and your doctor, your psychiatrist, you name what the practitioner is. I'm speaking of the whole culture of numbing to the point where we are deeply dissociated from our day to day. And what I've noticed is that when it comes to certain substances like weed, for instance, and I know people are going to get mad at me about this because how dare you speak about weed? I've never been a big substance person, and that's just me. There's addiction that runs in my family, and also I've just like not having to rely on too much to show up optimally. But what I've noticed is with certain substances like weed, there are people who will say, "Oh, well, it's not addictive, so I can use it as much. I can just smoke whenever. I can do whatever when I want." And it's like, okay, if it works for you, it works for you. However, I've noticed a lot of people who aren't aware of how their use of certain substances, even weed, limits their ability to really deal with life and relate with people. I have had dating experiences where I'm getting to know people and someone shows up high on the first date. It's like, what are we doing? What are you doing here, dude? Like that? Really? Like that? Or people who it's just a part of their evening, weekend routine to unwind, and then we're talking the early stages of dating, and it's like, I mean, they don't realize it, but I see it. It's like you're paranoid. You are paranoid. I had somebody who, after our first date, I asked him the simple question of, what are you what are you open to in this phase of your life as you're meeting people? And because he chose to smoke after that date, I didn't. He got super paranoid and he construed in his head that I was trying to force him into a relationship, and he got really paranoid and he ended our walk early. And I was like, whoa, okay. All that to say, there's this culture of not questioning our relation to substances, especially ones that are allegedly not addictive. And that's problematic because what you're using to numb and deal with life also affects your ability to relate with people or dissociate from both life and people, right? And weed is one of those things that I wish more people talked about it. It does affect how you show up, and it affects different people differently. And if you don't know objectively how you're showing up, ask other people. Ask other people because they might know something you don't know about how you're really showing up. I say this out of love, not out of judgment. There's just so much on this topic of, you know, coming back to our internal locus of control and not blaming everything on the other person and considering like, what part do I play in all these things that are transpiring in my life and relationships? Because as a recovering codependent, I have learned that one of the most sexy drugs, right, that is in the highest supply, right, and highest consumption is finger pointing out there rather than thumb pointing here, and considering what part do I play? If not, what part did I play in making that thing horrible? What part can I play in making things better? You know what I'm saying? What's your experience with this? Let me know down in the comments. If you are a heart-centered visionary in a season of reinvention and transition, resources down below about coaching. If you found any value from this podcast, let a friend know. Please. That's how good things spread. We'll talk soon.